Welcome back for part 4 of the Masters of Max Mobile App Experience podcast with futurist and digital product strategist Julie Ask and your host, Tom Butta.
So how is AI factoring in? Is anyone doing it well today? Any brands that you're aware of?
No, not that I know of. I've had the opportunity to spend a lot of time talking to marketers and to folks that are talking about Gen AI and thinking about what to do with Gen AI. You'd probably have like 3/4 of them saying they're planning to use Gen AI. And then if you ask them how, that number would drop way off. And they're probably hoping it's going to be embedded in some of the marketing tools that they're buying. So I think there's a big gap between what people want to do and what they're actually doing today. But as they think about Gen AI, what it is forcing them to do is really think about their data strategy.
Yeah, and zero-party, first-party data. I mean, there's a lot of things obviously we're doing to help encourage brands to interact in real time in non-intrusive ways, and that's all data. That can only enhance that experience.
Right, and I think the point you break up is really important because I can't really use Gen AI effectively in the ways that are really going to make a difference in my business unless I have a really strong data strategy. That's where you really get into the zero-party data that you suggested. That's where I'm beginning to ask consumers, what do they like? What don't they like? When you have that zero-party data and you begin to really learn who I am, these models becomes a lot more interesting.
How do you connect that, right? How do you do that when we as consumers are operating on different types of glass with apps on the web, even on desktop? And then there's experiences that we have in real life, right? In stores, in venues.
That's like the thing that's going to be really hard to get to. There's like 2 really big things that you said in there that are important. One is identity or identity resolution. Like, how do you know who I am? This is really where the importance of onboarding comes. If you can get me to build, create an account with a username and a login and do preferences, knowing who I am is one of the first steps. And on the other side of it, what you're talking about is context. How much context can one of these models hold about who I am and what my past interactions are? Prioritizing it and knowing what's important in the moment is a hard problem to solve. And I think that's where you come back to what a hard job the marketer has. You can't just be in a mode of like take from the consumer. If they ask me for a bit of information about what pets I own, and I say I own a dog and a cat, I expect them to use that information almost immediately to provide some kind of value to me. In fact, I might not even give them that information if they don't tell me what the immediate value exchange is going to be. The marketer has to have that trust and has to have that ongoing engagement with the consumer to be able to, create that engagement flywheel and generate that value.
I think the key word that you used is trust. It doesn't take much to erode trust.
No, it doesn't. And I think it's really such an important issue, and it only becomes more important as we look into the future.
It's hugely interesting because not only can you impersonate a brand, you can impersonate a person, you can impersonate a place, you can impersonate information. And I just wonder, are there things that brands could do to sort of get on top of this, to manage through all of this change you're talking about as the futurist?
There probably are tools. You're probably going to develop tools. The next generation of messaging, RCS, which we hope Apple is going to support this year, will help authenticate brands so that consumers know who the message is coming from and that it's truly coming from the brand. We go from what Gen AI is today, which is a tool that can help us with coding and it can get information for us and it can help us write emails. And we evolve in this direction of, artificial general intelligence, where this intelligence has judgment and it can sense and it can, we've somehow authorized it to make suggestions or take action on our behalf. There's a lot of, there's possibly a lot of risks associated with that.
But what about the kinds of tools that, say, marketers need today to actually put themselves in a position to win? Are people taking advantage of, the whole, I wish I can operate at the speed of mobile, but I can't because I have to toss it over the wall to have developers work on it, this idea of low or no code?
I think the question you're asking is really important about marketers because it also takes into account, right, this data strategy. But as we think about serving consumer, anticipating their needs and serving them more proactively in the moments, you're absolutely right that we want to rely more on real-time data. We want to rely on location or the temperature or what I'm feeling in the moment, or, right, there's going to be a lot more sensors in our environment that provide data, and marketers are going to want to be able to access that real-time data. when we think about how data is used to push out messaging or to push out content to consumers, there's 4 ways it's used, right? It's used for decide what content, what person, when, and in what channel. And there's a lot of dynamic factors in place. Marketers can't operate effectively in an environment where they're relying on developers to update apps or to do the work, or they're somehow in a queue that's weeks or months long. The environments that consumers are going to expect, because I expect, if I'm going to share this data, I expect an environment to be very personalized to me. There's going to be dynamic assembly, and marketers have to have tools to build those rules and automation and use artificial intelligence to dynamically assemble these elements and serve me in these moments. It sounds a bit abstract, right? But it's kind of like, if you know that I'm walking into a store, what are you going to do now?
Well, it's sort of wasted moments.
Right.
If you're not prepared, right? And especially if you've given information, the expectation is, so what's coming back, right?
Right. And if I share my location, what's the value that I get in exchange?
Yeah, 100%.
If I share data from my watch, if I share data from sensors in my living room, what do I get in return? Because, marketers also have to be smart. It's not about just getting like all the data I can, but it's really thinking about like, what are these really important moments in the journey that the customer has with me where I do want to engage them? And then what data do I need to gauge them effectively?
Julie, thank you very much. This has been a great conversation.
Thank you for having me.